hello. So this is a series. It's a series on BBBEE. I thought I was going to make one video, and then it turns out I can't. It's like it's too much to talk about. I know it's not going to go viral because, viral video needs to be short. This is not a short video. In fact, it's not a short series. I'm investigating two things, or I'm trying to investigate two things. And that is, number one, does BEE, BBBEE means broad-based black economic empowerment, and its predecessor, BEE, was just black economic empowerment. My question is one, does BBBEE encourage investment into South Africa? In other words, does it enlarge the economic pie? My second question is, does BBBEE work as an economic system to basically redistribute wealth, specifically into the favor of black people? Does it work? That's my second question. Full disclosure, I'm not a black person, for those of you who haven't noticed. Well, if you're blind and you're listening to this in the form of a podcast, I guess, you don't know. I assume people listening to this are not blind. So I guess, my opinion will be biased because I am white. I am discriminated against by BBBEE. Now, whether you call it fair or not, I'll leave that question up to you. I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. This is not a complaining video. It is not like a denigration video. It's not an Uncle Tom video. It's simply like white Uncle Tom. It's simply a video where I want these two questions answered. Does it grow the economy? Using investment, does it bring in investment into the country? Number one. Number two, does it work? Okay, let's have a look. So, theoretical models and implementation mechanisms of BBBEE. Broad-based black economic empowerment was not merely a legislative invention, but a policy grounded in both historical redress and developmental economics. Its underlying rationale draws from theories of distributive justice, inclusive growth, and state intervention in correcting structural inequalities. From its inception, BBBEE has attempted to balance market mechanisms with regulatory enforcement, creating a hybrid model that blends moral imperatives with economic strategy. What I'm going to do now is we will look at how it was made. Okay, the technicality of it. I first look at the genesis, now I'm looking at the technicality of how it was created. Remember, they didn't just receive the ideas or the laws on a bunch of golden tablets from the heaven or whatever, or from hell, or however you want to look at it. It came from other humans, or it came from humans. So let's look at the logic behind it. The logic underpinning BBBEE is rooted in a normative framework of economic justice and transformation, drawing parallels from international experiences, such as affirmative action in the United States, or DEI in the United States, as you would know it there, or indigenization in Nigeria. BBBEE reflects a commitment to rectify the racially skewed accumulation of assets and opportunities in South Africa. The goal is not only to redistribute wealth, but to restructure the very process of production, ownership, and control within the economy. So, basically, translation, to dumb it down, or just to, put it in other words, paraphrase it, it's done to like redistribute wealth, or rather equalize opportunity. It's not at least in theory, it's not supposed to be punitive at all. So that's like the theory. Like it's just to fix what other people will call a broken system. Many people, like sometimes I would have felt like that sometimes, like because I'm a white person, I would feel it's punitive. Like, you know, they're getting me back for apartheid. You know, like the seventh generation shall pay for thy sins, according to Abraham, according to what God said to Abraham. It does feel like that now and then, but like then also you have to look at the logic, the cold hard logic behind this. You know, it may be, you know, talking in the parlance of social justice warriors, it may be now other people's turn to eat. Okay, and that's just how it works. Like, you know, as I looked in the genesis of this, South Africa isn't the only country. And I spoke about India and the United States, but you also find affirmative action in Brazil, and I think in some other countries as well. So it's not, BBBEE isn't like the super exotic thing. And right now in the United States with Donald Trump and stuff, like maybe it will be banned, but then probably you'll see in future it just comes back. For God knows for how long, but usually when there is an imbalance, you won't necessarily find a law in any country. You won't necessarily find a law like BBBEE, but people would at least be clamoring for it because they will view the economy as being unfair. This can be true, like, for example, if you look at South America as well and Central America, where you had the so-called caudillos, the landlords, and then basically the peasants, which happened to be, well, like the natives, the Indians of the land, and then like the Indians were discriminated against, you know, like used as it was a feudal system in many cases. And then obviously to this day, you can go to Central America, South America, the people, if you see a person with blonde hair and blue eyes, I will bet you money, I swear to God, I'll bet you money that that person will, on average, if we take the average, the national average of, let's say, Chile, I promise you that that person will make more money than let's say a local Indian, simply because of the system, the mechanism. I'm not going to talk about the morality of this because it's not the point. I'm just talking about why do you have this? Where does it come from? So, according to Shai, Molafignana and Kino in 2019, BBBEE policy is intended to achieve meaningful participation of all black people in the economy through direct and indirect means. This entails a long-term commitment to altering the trajectory of economic inclusion through interventions that address ownership, skills development, enterprise creation, and procurement practices. So you see, like, it's not just BEE, when they first made it, I can't remember because it was like a long time ago, but when they started BEE in 1994, and then later they were like, okay, it's not working, we need BBBEE, which is like more intense, and apparently now they want to make it even more intense. We'll see if that works or not, but like, it was done with good intentions. That's like what these authors like Shai Molafinyana and Kino said in their 2019 paper, it was done with good intentions, at least according to the ANC government and to many black people. The authors emphasize that BBBEE operates within a derived logic model, a structured representation of how inputs, e.g. legislation incentives, could lead to outputs, e.g. black ownership in black employment, and ultimately to outcomes, e.g. reduced inequality and economic inclusion. While this model is theoretically sound, its effectiveness is conditional on implementation fidelity, institutional capacity, and accurate measurement. So basically, what does implementation fidelity mean? Well, it's something like, is it fair and is it non-corrupt? That's very important. So I'm going to try to look at, is it fair, no, I'm not even talking about fairness in these videos. Like, for a moment, I forgot why I'm talking, which happens to me. That's why I call it Beardman Rants and not Beardman Delivers Academic Paper. Basically, is it being done in a correct, efficient way? You'll always hear me in all freaking videos I make, especially if it's about economic systems. Effectiveness, efficiency, meritocracy, these kinds of things. And, that's important. And then institutional capacity. Like, does a government have the means to, let's say, do all of these things? Because you can, let's say, you may want to do all these things, but if you don't have, good tenders or good projects, or basically just the money, the budget coming from the taxpayer, and a lot of these taxpayers, maybe even the majority, I'll do a video on that to make sure, are white people or white companies. I mean, that's why there is BBBEE. If the tax base was majority black owned, if the tax base was 80% of all income, then probably BBBEE would not have existed. But there is this economic injustice that they want to fix, or they claim they want to fix. And then lastly, accurate measurement. You can't have affirmative action or DEI or BBBEE if you can't measure the impact. Now, you can obviously look at an easy way to measure it would simply be to look at someone's tax, the tax they're paying, or rather the income that they declare, or rather the amount of money they claim to do a project, these kinds of things. So it's not, or the assets they own, you can go and count that. So that's not too difficult to do. What is difficult to do is, okay, so we say we want to empower black people, okay? So that's fair, but what is difficult to measure is to see if it trickles down. Because remember, what do we want to do? As I said in the first video, we want to minimize the Gini coefficient, the GNI coefficient. We want to, or not minimize it because it's never going to be zero, but we want to reduce that. That's very important. So, is some of this going towards, is there some form of trickle down economics? That's a short question. Let's go on. The BBBEE scorecard, that's the way of measuring it, and codes of good practice. Central to the implementation of BBBEE is a BBBEE scorecard, which functions as both a compliance tool and a transformation incentive. The scorecard is codified in the Codes of Good Practice, published by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. TTIC, which provides standard criteria for addressing the transformation efforts of businesses. The scorecard is composed of the following elements. 1. Ownership. 2. Measurement control. 3. Skills development. 4. Enterprise and supplier development. 5. Socioeconomic development. So let's look at ownership. That measures the percentage of equity held by black people in a company. So that can be shares, that can be, capital stock, these kinds of things. Then management control evaluates black representation at board and executive levels. This is I just mentioned ownership. Like the previous one that we had in South Africa, BBBEE, I believe it didn't have that. Like it only looked at management control. So how many CEOs do you have on your board of directors? Okay. Then number 3, skills development, assesses investment in training and development for black employees. Why is this important? Now, well, I think I said this before. South Africa has a big educational problem for various reasons, but too many reasons to mention. I can do a series of videos on this because it's lots of creators make this 5-minute or 20-minute videos, and God bless them, their ability to say this. But I feel I would rather make this long, boring thing about something, because I feel like you can't just leave out information. Okay, that's not how it works. You need to, it's like signal fidelity. You remember how, well, if you're old like me, you remember how computers looked back in the 80s, right? Like these big blocks and stuff like that. That's because we could only measure so much information. Now it's this super nice, file. It's a super nice image, and it's because it's a freaking 10 gig file or whatever. It's because now we can capture more information. So essentially, I wanted to talk about black representation at board and executive levels. So, you need to, it's a difficult balance. You need to find someone who's competent and black. Now, look, I know that it is racist, but sounds racist. It's not racist. But a company will try to find these two things. And it's not necessarily as easy as it sounds, because remember, this is the reason BBBEE exists, is we want to bring in people into the economy. If people are super good at if they're hyper competitive and aggressive, and it's the smartest person in the room, the most dominant person in the room, then you can, those people will just bubble to the top, irregardless of who they are. What you can say is okay, it doesn't work that way for wealth. And I think that's true, because it's just the way, it's math. So if you have, if you have a certain amount of money, then it will always the interest gained by it will always increase. So if you're let's say a white person and you have this intergenerational wealth, you have an easier life. So that I can understand if you want to basically control for that. And then another thing is, you may argue, it's argued by many people, and I fully understand this, that if you don't have representation, those people that's not being represented, and this can be anything, it can be women, black people, transgenders, old people, very young people. If they're not represented, they may have, or they may develop, and it may remain so, that because it's a psychological thing, it may remain so, a sense of inferiority, which shouldn't be there, because, like, let's say that person really does have merit. It's simply the way it is. If you feel you're doing something that you think has never been done before, you may find it challenging. I am not scared of, like, I'm a swimming guy. I'm not scared of going for a 3 or 4 kilometer swim. Now I usually swim about 1.5, 2 kilometers, but simply because I can comfortably do 1.5 to 2 kilometers, I know I may be able to do 3 or 4. Now, if someone, let's say for one, assume they can swim, but like they have never swam, like, let's say 200 meters before, then they will doubt themselves. And that goes for everything. It goes for driving, it goes for writing a math exam, it goes for approaching a woman in a bar or a club. Like, this is a silly, stupid way of saying that representation has a very good reason to be there. So anyway, going to number 4, enterprises and supplier development. So this is like focuses on support for black-owned suppliers and small businesses. So this is like, for those of you who are into strategy and stuff, this is like a way to lengthen your supply chain to get extra value-added stuff. And this is kind of fair in the sense that this is exactly what Afrikaans people did during apartheid. We created a fully white Afrikaner value chain. This was the idea. As I said, my dad was in the Afrikaner Broederbond, and that's precisely what they wanted. They wanted, a turnkey, fully implemented business model which they all can rely on. Because remember, if your supplier can hold you hostage, like if they really want to, so if there's like some weird, let's say the manufacturers are race A and the suppliers are race B. If there's like some weird clash between the two, supplier B, with the assumption they've got enough, race B, which is the supplier, with the assumption that they've got enough capital, can kind of hold the manufacturer, race A, hostage. So you don't want that. That's why you want your suppliers to also come into this BBBEE mix. And then lastly, socioeconomic development, or SED, reflects contributions to black communities in areas such as education, health, and social welfare. So for me, this is the most important one. Maybe I'm retarded or ignorant or whatever, but basically, this is kind of the dictionary, like the dictionary definition of empowerment. To find something in education, health, and social welfare, because this is the base of the pyramid. And in many cases in South Africa, this doesn't exist. I spoke about, I don't know which video it was, but I spoke about, for example, education in South Africa, where certain black kids have to walk through rivers to get to school. They have to, I've seen many videos where they have to put like their clothes and their books on the top of their head and walk through a river to get to a school. The school, by the way, is like freaking, it can be 10, 20 kilometers away. They don't have money for public transport. That's obviously why they're walking to school. And when there's a flood, they can drown. It has happened. It's relatively, it doesn't happen every day, but it's a common. If you tell me a story like that, I'm not surprised as a South African, because I've heard this many times before. So when we talk about empowerment, education has to be there. Health has to be there. Social welfare has to be there. Social welfare too, like, now I'm going to talk about another controversial thing, like black tax. So black tax is when a up-and-coming or a successful black South African, or maybe black person, but specifically black South African person, now has to pay for their family. Some like it and they think it's a good idea. It's like a noble idea. Other people like it less because, like, now, let's say it prevents them or it retards them from buying a car or a house or paying down their student debt or whatever. However, what's indisputable is that the contributors of the so-called black tax, they are contributing to social welfare. So what is happening is the pressure on the South African state to help the poorest of the poor goes down. Okay, so that's the idea behind social welfare. And if it can be done privately, even better. Because the state is usually, any government, even if it's a Nordic country, which I like so much, even they, whenever the state's involved, stuff becomes a bit slower because there's no real incentive. You know, if you're paying social welfare to your brother, you know, like, you know your brother, and it will be much quicker as opposed to, let's say, the government, who don't know your brother at all, and he just has to wait for his check, his welfare check. So, okay, just recapping. Ownership, management control, skills development, enterprise and supply development, socioeconomic development, or SAD. The codes apply broadly across the South African economy, encompassing public entities, private corporations, non-profit organizations, and partnerships. As Creer, 2011, in his paper notes, many enterprises conducting businesses with state and or another measured entity falls under the purview of the BBBEE framework. So, yes, it is like implemented everywhere in South Africa. This is why, for many people, that's why it's, for all people, it's either very controversial or it is an imperative. So that's how South Africans generally feel about it. Like, you don't get South Africans who's like neutral about it. No, it's like there's usually a relatively strong feeling about it. Institutional infrastructure, the role of the DTIC and BBBEE Commission. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the DTIC, is the central coordinating authority for BBBEE. Within its purview is the BBBEE Commission, established in accordance with the 2003 Act to monitor compliance, investigate misinterpretations such as fronting, and promote best practices. So remember, fronting is when you have, let's say, a black-owned shelf company, a blackface, a blackface company owned by black people, but the company getting the contract is really, or doing the work, is really a white company. But because the white company or the Indian or the colored company can't get the project, or they can't get the tender, they then get this shelf company to get the tender. And it's like bribery, like they bribe these people in the shelf company so they can get to work. And it used to be legal, and then it became illegal or frowned upon, and now it's totally illegal. And I agree with that. Like, one has to be sincere in life, and this was just like, dishonest. I am not necessarily pro anti-BE. I'm just saying, if you're going to bribe someone in a shelf companies to get a project, maybe you need the money, if you're a company, but like, it's still unethical, and possibly it is illegal to go through a shelf company. Don't do that. That's what the Russians do, the Russian government. So the DTIC is empowered to maintain a registry of verified BBBEE transactions, investigate complaints regarding misinterpretation, issue guidance notes and advisory opinions, conduct research and publish periodic reports. Despite this formal structure, Shai et al. In their 2019 paper cautioned that weak enforcement, under-resourced regulatory bodies, and inconsistent reporting by firms limit the Commission's ability to enforce systematic compliance. So you see, this is already a problem, is that measurement isn't done like it should be. If you have a proper measurement tool, then like any mistake of BBBEE, any Dierenbrok, any breakthrough or positive thing about BBBEE can't truly be mentioned because you can't properly measure it. So if you're going to have something like BBBEE, you kind of need to start off by having the right tool. Okay. Much like if you're jogging for a full body transformation because the doctor said you've got a fatty liver, like me, you want to buy one of these smartwatches that measure your heart rate and stuff, so like how much you're actually doing. Like, are you losing weight? Is your cardiovascular system improving? So the same goes for something like BBBEE. Okay, public procurement as a lever of empowerment. One of the most significant mechanisms through which BBBEE is implemented is public procurement. Government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in South Africa, and through preferential procurement regulations, it seeks to reward companies that demonstrate high levels of empowerment. So I mentioned it earlier, it's like basically government expansion, or so something like quantitative easing, where it's a monetary tool. So you push money, it just now it happens to be more black people. As outlined in the 2017 Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, or the PPFA regulations, tenders are evaluated not only on price but also on empowerment credentials. A 90-10 or 80-20 point system is applied, where a portion of the score is reserved for BBBEE status. This creates a strong incentive for companies to improve their scorecard ratings in order to remain competitive in government contracting. However, as Shai et al. In the 2019 paper point out, this procurement-based model introduces certain risks. It encourages short-term tick box compliance that can incentivize fronting and may lead to companies inflating credentials to secure tenders. Moreover, the fragmentation across government departments and lack of centralized monitoring make it difficult to track long-term impact. So, the rules are clear and the policy is clear. But when you come to this tick box thing, I jotted down to a lot of South African criminality. Unfortunately, these days, all South Africans have a certain level of criminality. I think it's got something to do with survival. You don't want to be in a South African prison, so you pay the traffic guard a bribe, or like there's a massive pothole in front of your house and no one wants to fix it. And there's this one guy who's like, okay, if you give me, 200 Rand, I'll fix this thing for you. Then maybe you give the 200 Rand. So it comes, I want to say, these days, because of that service delivery has collapsed, South Africans tend to do what's necessary to survive. And that'll include tick boxing, BBBEE laws. Sector charters and industry-specific implementation. To address the diversity of industries and ensure relevance, sector-specific BBBEE charters have been developed. These include charters for mining, financial services, ICT, tourism, and construction sectors, amongst others. Each charter adapts the generic scorecard to its sector's realities, including different thresholds and targets. For example, the mining charter emphasizes community development and ownership by mine workers and local communities, while the financial sector charter includes measures related to access to financial services and affordable housing. The sector charters serve to customize transformation criteria for different economic sectors, reflect industry-specific constraints and opportunities, align private sector transformation with public sector development objectives. Although these charters enhance the granularity of implementation, they can also complicate enforcement due to varying definitions, thresholds, and scoring methods. As Creer in 2011 in his paper argues, consistency in interpretation and monitoring remains a key challenge. So, every sector is different, and it's supposed to it's supposed to service the economic sector it's assigned to. Like every sector, like finance, banking, telecoms, will have different needs. Because remember, if you're going to have a BBBEE or a DEI system, then you don't want it just in one. Well, with the assumption that all the sections are broken. If it's only one section, or if all of the sections are functioning with the exception of one, you just implement it in the one that's broken, like Hollywood, for example. But unfortunately, South Africa is broken in so many different ways. That's why they have BBBEE in all of these sections. So usually, as I said, like in the previous video, I was an engineer when I started out in my career. We were just, in the office, like the programmers, we were just white people, and only later that we get we were still the majority white when I left, but only later that we get, some diversity. So the idea is to bring in diversity so that society is reflected, and also so essentially it's part of this breaking of cyclical poverty. So essentially, you have to find the financial thing, where, let's say, with education, if you can buy your child education, any a 5-year degree, then they can go on and work and make money, and if they don't have any student debt, they can buy property and stuff like that. Later they can give this to the property. If they die, they can give the property to their descendants and stuff like that. So that's one reason why they want to have BBBEE. Another reason for this diversity is that you feel you want to stand on someone's shoulders. Like you have a pioneer who does the work, and the pioneer will probably have a tougher environment to work in than you. Like every generation or every iteration of people not just going through a company, going through life in general, they build on, or they should build on, what was done before them. To give you an idea, I'm not bragging about it, but my great-grandmother was born in a concentration camp, of a British concentration camp when we had the Anglo-Boer War. And they were, so it started by her just surviving a war or a concentration camp, mind you, not just the war. And then descendants were dirt poor, but then every generation makes more money. And then later on, they pass down property and stuff like that. So essentially, you normally in societies, you are helped by the previous generation, and this is why they want DEI in every sector. So it's not because it can be problematic, and it can hurt society. Like in the USA, when they say what Jews control Hollywood and Jews control banking or finance, fine, but then go measure it and see if it's true. And quite often you'll find it's not true, and it can seriously hurt people. Was it Charlottesville where they shouted, "Jews shall not replace us"? Well, luckily, no Jews got killed, but it may change. Look at Nazi Germany. Do you really need to look further than Nazi Germany? Probably no. So essentially, this is why you want diversity. To put it into another good example I can think of is the South African police. So very often, it's not always possible because black people are the majority, 80 to 20%. 80% black people and 20% the rest. And of the rest is 5% black people. So 5%, is white people. So 5% of the total are white people. The police, they will try to put a black cop and then a cop of another race as far as possible. So if there is some weird racist incident, the party involved with the police, the criminal or the victim or whatever is happening, they can't claim that there was racism because there's both a white and a black cop. And that's kind of cool if you think about it. And it goes beyond being cool. It actually becomes necessary for a country like South Africa. If it was a Nordic country, I should actually send the Nordic countries an email. I want advertisement money from the governments. If it's a Nordic country and both cops are, Arabs, it'll be irrelevant because freaking everything in the Nordic country works. But in South Africa, you need to balance these things out. It's just like the kind of country we are. So compliance, fronting, and verification challenges. A persistent issue in BBBEE is implementation. Implementation is the practice of fronting, the misinterpretation of empowerment credentials. This include the use of nominal black shareholders with no real control, falsified documentation, and superficial partnerships designed to secure tenders or contracts. To address, this is to just illustrate that there is a lot of corruption. When people talk about BBBEE, like it's always like, the beneficiaries, the black beneficiaries of BBBEE is corrupt. But there's a fair amount of either local white South Africans or, foreign companies that may be Asian, but is usually European or American, who basically get contracts by fronting. And this is then a example of white corruption. So make no mistake, BBBEE isn't like, how do you say, a black problem or a black thing or whatever. It like transcends society. And if it fails, you can't just look at black people. It is not, if there weren't white companies paying these bribes, or doing unethical work, fronting wouldn't exist. So let's be very clear about this. To address this, the BBBEE Amendment Act of 2013 introduced penalties for fronting, including criminal sanctions. The BBBEE Commission was also given investigative powers to curb these practices. Despite these measurements, enforcement remain uneven. Verification is conducted by accredited BBBEE verification agencies. However, as noted in the Sustainability Journal article, questions of Shai et al. 2019, questions have arisen regarding the independence and consistency of these agencies. Conflicts of interests, limited oversight, and capacity constraints undermine the credibility of verification results. This is another problem of affirmative action in BBBEE is there's no good governmental organization that can go around measuring this. It's done kind of like privately, and it was also done in a very incompetent way. So you can pay a bribe. So if you have a BBBEE problem, whatever it may be, if you lean hard enough on the person, or if you pay a bribe big enough, the problem will go away. That's just how life works. A good example now is Elon Musk. It seems that Elon Musk has bypassed, or is bypassing, BBBEE regulations. Now, whether it's for the good of the country, it's about Starlink, so it's to get more satellite stuff. I can't say if it's for good or for bad. I know I did, communication engineering, but so I know how good and useful satellite information is and how necessary it is for a country like South Africa, which has a lot of load shedding. When there's load shedding, then remember the cell phone towers go down. So you need satellite communications quite often, especially if you're in a security weak area like a farm in the countryside. But I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm really saying is what Elon Musk did isn't fair because it manipulates the market. It's no longer, it's no longer the free hand of the market, as Moulton said. Someone is pushing down on the scale. So that's not how it should work. And remember, even if BBBEE didn't exist, that person will still go around and mess with the economic system. So It's just this kind of like unethical criminal mind will always exist. It's just part of business. And here they just have a opportunity to, do it. Because the BBBEE policing isn't being done properly. Gaps in monitoring and impact evaluation. One of the most glaring weaknesses in the BBBEE system is the absence of robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. As Shai et al. In their 2019 paper emphasized, no summative evaluation has been conducted to conclusively assess whether BBBEE has achieved its desired impact. While periodic scorecard reports and surveys exist, they often rely on self-reporting and counterfactual analysis. So, self-reporting is a bunch of nonsense. Like, you get responsible people who will self-report. Like, today I'm a fat ass, I weigh like 95 kilograms. Like, and you do some, exercise and you drink water and you don't eat that half a kilogram of cake you wanted to, and then next week you weigh 94.5 kilos, and this, if you like self-report this and if you're honest, then great, the system works. But if you're always going to lie to yourself, then you're always going to be a fat ass. And this is the problem. Honesty in South Africa is a very rare commodity. South Africans like to lie. And I am not disparaging South Africans. I am a South African. I'm just saying we have lost a bit of control in our moral compass. And it's not just my opinion. You can go and have a look. Talk to church ministers, talk to talk to business owners, talk to policemen, talk to lawyers, talk to civic leaders, talk to activists, talk to journalists. There is a problem in South Africa when it comes to honesty. So basically, one of the problems with BBBEE is that it can fall victim to dishonesty, where certain things are supposed to happen, but it's not happening. So that's all for this section. Remember, okay, I got sidetracked a lot and stuff like that, but remember, what I'm really trying to do here, I'm not saying BBBEE is good. I am not saying it is bad. Remember, some people say BBBEE is needed to punish the white people for South Africa. That's just a joke. And to break cyclical poverty, to make South Africa a more fair and just society. Other people say it is like it just increases like inequality, or it's a way to punish white people to get them to leave the country, whatever. There's many opinions on BBBEE. I'm just interested in two questions. That's all. Does BBBEE work? In other words, does it work? Does it do what it claims, what its proponents claim it does in the media or on social media or by political parties? That's my first question, is does it work? The second question is, does it bring investment into the country? Does it grow the economy? Does it grow the economical pie? I'm only interested in those two questions. So whatever, I believe I said that in the beginning of this video. and I'm ending the video with this. Whatever I said in the middle is just to give you some background. If you are interested in the two questions I would like to ask, you'll have to keep continuing listening to the series, I'm afraid, so I can get some interest on YouTube. Also, well, as I said, it takes a lot of explanation. If you're South African, you kind of don't need to watch this video unless you're 16 and you're doing a school project, or unless you're retarded. Maybe if you're a foreigner, you need some explanation, because foreigners will have a smaller understanding about this. So that's all for now. Thank you very much for listening to me, and bye-bye.